Good afternoon and welcome to this week's Building Power. I am your host, Zakia Sankara Jabbar, and I'm excited today to have this conversation with Baba Wekesa Mazimoyo, who is a co-founder of the Aya Educational Institute, which is based, I believe, in Decatur, Georgia, so right outside of Atlanta there. And, I wanted to bring Baba Wekesa back on. He was actually one of our first guests when we first launched this grassroots education advocacy podcast platform. And I wanted to bring him back because there's a lot happening in the news right now as it relates to education. As we know that teachers unions all over the country are filing lawsuits to prevent the return of in-person learning. There is also lawsuits being filed to say that, hey, before we come back to in-person learning, then we want to require all of these different things. And where I live in my school district, teachers are asking for plexiglass, and they want each student to be surrounded by plexiglass, right? We're also seeing that there's some teachers who are asking that we wait for the CDC to approve the vaccine for children. LA, as a matter of fact, is one of the biggest unions and biggest school districts that have come out and said, we're not interested in coming back to school until children must have the COVID-19 vaccine. So there's a lot happening. I also saw an article recently that says, Black parents have been pushed into homeschooling. And so we're going to talk about all of these different things with this expert, clearly an expert who's been running Aya, I believe, 16 years. He'll tell us all about it. But anyway, Baba, let me be quiet. People came here to hear you. Let us know a little bit more about yourself and how you got into Aya Educational Institute. Tell us all about what you're up to, Baba. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you so much for all you do, and thank you for this powerful program and this conversation, which is so critical. And it's scary, and it's also a great opportunity. It's scary because it's different. We don't know what you have the coronavirus. You have being in plexiglass, being in cages. You have people who weren't doing a good job teaching our children when they weren't afraid of them giving them viruses. They were just afraid of them being African.
Come on, that's right.
Now you have folks who have all the more reason to be afraid, or in this case, the fear has been put on the coronaviruses. So y'all, touch. School is about touching. It's about connection. It's about. It's not just about the accumulation of knowledge, and so when you have folks have been raised, white people and Black people raised to be fearful of Black children. And now, on top of that, fearful of the virus that these Black children will bring or can bring or likely to bring, et cetera, blah, 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 then you're going to have even less effective teaching, okay? And so it's important. Now, it also is a challenge because we haven't organized our lives to teach our children. And this is the opportunity. It was a mistake for us in desegregation, some call integration, to relinquish the chief responsibility to educate our children. Okay,
I agree.
And hindsight is 2020. So I was a part of the civil rights movement, Black Power movement. I was a child. I went to public school, but I'm talking about either public or private. This is not a rant on public schools. This is saying that we need to educate our children and organize as our ancestors did, at least maintain responsibility. It doesn't mean that we also don't use other people and other resources, but the whole notion of who's going to educate our children, what they're going to be educated to do, to achieve, to think, that's critical. And so as difficult as this opportunity is, it's an opportunity for us to answer those questions. And it's really important that our parents get some support and being able to answer those questions, to have a safe place to say, here is what education does my child need to succeed? What education does my child need to serve our people and the world in that order? And I'm going to repeat that. Because often we just say you need to go to school, and succeeding is you're graduating with a high school degree so you can get a job or so that you can go to college, right? Without really any real understanding or discussion about what they need to know, what skills they need to have, what knowledge they need to possess, what attitudes need to be developed in them so that they will be able to support themselves and their families and lift our people and then the world in that order. That's what opportunity we get to talk about and discuss. Unfortunately, we've been our own education has scared us so that we don't think we're capable of answering that question. No, that's a basic question, okay? And everybody can answer that question, right? And everybody ought to. And your answers to the question are important for your own child, for our own child. What to to live a life that I want this child to live? What is it that they need to know, value, care about? All right, we get to do that, say that, and we also get to then structure that in. So what they don't learn about something else. If they learn about something that we decide is important for them to succeed in life. Now, of course, part of that is how you have children prepare for college. For those people who are new to homeschooling, right, I was developed a long time ago, and we support homeschoolers, all right? And we had to struggle with the same kind of, okay, we want our children to be able to go to college. But we discovered quickly. I remember going through a seventh grade test when we first got started. So we wanted to focus on middle school and high school. And so, in seventh grade is where you learn state history. So we said, okay, let's do this. And so first it was we're going to defang this Georgia history book. It took all kinds. You can teach anything because racism was in everything. It was in every page. Okay, now if you only
Can I tell you a story really quickly? Just happened last night. I just told you before we went live that I have family that live in Cobb County. Cobb County schools are open, and my cousin has a daughter that's the same age as my daughter. I'm sorry, Asada's a year older. So anyway, their daughter's in kindergarten, and they're already seeing the brainwashing of and the cultivation of our children. She came home had painted a little stick figure, and it said, "I'm a patriot," and had the American flag. And he said he looked at that thing and balled it up and put it in the trash. But the daughter started crying, and then he had to explain to her that this is not what we trying to teach you. And so he said, I know, Zakia, you're gonna tell us not to take her out. He said, but we saving up and we gonna send her to Imhotep. That's another African Center school in Atlanta.
That's right. And a good one. That my daughter also went to early on, right? And helped to inspire actually us starting our education institute later on.
That's where they're gonna send their daughter over in Atlanta. Yeah.
And well, the point from your story is also one point is really important. A couple of points. First, it's really hard when we send our children someplace. What they expect is that we're sending them to a safe place. I want to say.
Well, that's the propaganda. We're told that it's safe.
There's two parts. That's their propaganda, but also we also know that it's not a safe place. Okay, from a child's perspective, if you say, "Mama gonna send me to, someplace," Mama's not gonna send me to a dangerous place. All right, and it's about time for us to take a look at how dangerous the place is. And I don't just mean, because we're going to protect them from the bullets. We're going to protect them from the drugs, and we're going to protect them from the things that white folks have said are most dangerous. But y'all, racism is dangerous, okay? And injected oppression, being taught that I'm no good, no count, no how, that my people are no good, no count, or that I am included when we say America. It's dangerous, that we don't understand what the old folks used to say when they would say sometimes, "Oh, Mr. Jim over there, you're a good man for a white man." See, that little "for a white man," which is important because there's a sense of there is good that in this area, and then there's good in our community. There's good that's general, and that's okay, and we like that, and we'll appreciate that. But then there's good with another qualification to it, all right? And it's important that we don't share, we don't educate them to that as if they don't see it and feel it. Okay, which is now let me tell you, we have a course That's an adult course that will start again. It's a rotating course for adults who are trying to teach our children, teachers and parents and whatever. It's called How Do We Teach Our Children About Oppression Without Depressing Them?
Yes, yes, that's what we need.
How
The
do we
adults
teach?
need it. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, oh, no question. This is not for the children. This is how do we, right? So if I got a child and he stays in kindergarten and I want to teach them about oppression in a sense to account for why I'm not teaching them this and why they're still going there, even though I don't, and what I need to be able to teach them about oppression in ways that doesn't make them more fearful, in ways that doesn't make them depressed. Tell me, what course did you go through? What degree did you get that taught you? How do I teach my children about oppression without depressing them? All right. And so we go through it's 6 classes over 3 months because you meet twice a month. And then there's work that you do in between. And we end up with a concert. We end up with a story to where people share what they have learned and how they've applied it in their lives with their children and their youth. I want to repeat it. How do we teach our children about oppression without depressing them? Now, our uncomfortableness sometimes is stimulated by their uncomfortableness. When I went to where was this? Iowa, no, Nebraska. I was asked to come to do a workshop on relationships, me and Mama Fia. But also, in order to help pay for the trip, the sponsor at the university asked would I meet with some counselors, some elementary school and high school, middle school counselors. So I said, sure. So we came in on that Friday and met with them. And while we were getting about ready to start, one of the white counselors was having a conversation and saying she really didn't like that some white child asked the black child about what she called slavery. Now, I say captivity, Africans in bondage, but she knows slavery. And the black woman agreed, like, oh no, he shouldn't ask about that. And I heard that, and I'm like confused. I'm saying, excuse me. The problem is not the white child asking about African in bondage and African captivity. Is that you haven't prepared the black child to answer. I said, you haven't prepared him? I said, if something catastrophic happened to our people, it happened to our people. You mean I shouldn't know about it? I shouldn't know how to talk about it? I should somehow just mentioning it could create all kind of catastrophic illnesses in my head? And no, that's crazy. That's crazy. So they said, well, what do you mean we haven't prepared the black child to answer? I said, well, I'll answer that question with a question. Tell me a time when white people in this country were oppressed by other white people. Early in the making of the country, when were white people oppressed by other white people? And they stumped, they're like, huh? Do you mean, I said, no, I'm talking about the beginning of the country. And somebody says, oh, you're talking about the Revolutionary War. Another person, oh, you mean you're talking about like Paul Revere? I said, uh-huh. I said, notice, this is the time when the white, speaking of the patriots and whatever, right? When the white British, or those who loyal to the British, okay, the British were oppressing, at least from the perspective of the patriots, that they were being oppressed. I said, but now how did you even talk about, when you think about that period, you think about that period from how you fought it. You think about that period.
It's always taught from a
position of resistance. All right. It's position of, oh yeah. I said, so if you want to teach the black child to answer, then I said, let's role play it. I said, I'll be the black child that's been taught. You be the white child that is just curious. And so they asked me, well, Barbara Kessa, well, tell me about, slavery, they said, whatever. I said, oh, you mean that period, that time when we used ground glass as a food additive because we were determined to be free? Oh, you mean when mamas had to take care of white children and neglect their own, so they developed the ability to put a method of using hat pins to scramble the white child's brain. And their eyes got big. And that's when they said, well,
I didn't even know that.
When would you start? Because we don't know our resistance story. All we know is we're trying to shame white folks and how bad white folks treat us. All right, we wouldn't be here if our folks did not resist. And I'm not just talking about just Nat Turner resisted and just Harriet Tubman resisted. I'm sorry. We resisted from the time we were invaded till now. Okay. And we must teach, if we're going to teach our children about oppression, we teach it from how we resisted it. And so when I told the students, I told the teachers that, then they immediately said, yeah. And they couldn't argue with it because I said, that's how you teach the revolution. And they said, well, when would you teach them? I said, when do you start teaching about the Revolutionary War? What did you just say? Kindergarten. Kindergarten. QT kindergarten. I'm a
It was
patriot.
kindergarten. They
QT
already
kindergarten.
teaching them about patriots.
Exactly.
And the
So guess
patriots
what?
was a white man.
Yeah,
And he held an American flag in
exactly.
kindergarten, Cobb County, Georgia.
And the point is they'll learn that the patriots resisted. See, because when you say patriots, you're talking about a particular side of a battle. Okay? That's how one group got be called the patriots and the other one got called whatever the name was. The point is, you teach a black child, okay, resistance. So when they're asked about that, and so what they said is the white child then will go home, and because the white child will be concerned and scared or mad or whatever. I said, well, that's the child's business. All right, now they're going to go home. So all of a sudden, instead of this paternalistic, I don't want the white child to ask, you teach the black child to ask. Now the white child is scared and they're going home. I said, and then parents would call. I said, then you get to do your work as social workers, as counselors, right? Your job is to be here, all right? And so when you have a parent coming in and they're bent out of shape because a black child answered truthfully, but the answer they didn't want to hear, that they themselves were oppressors, then you say something like, well, that's what happened. And if you don't want to be on that side of the equation in the future, then that means you do different things. White people can't be on the positive side of that equation from black people's point of view. Okay, unless they just want to glorify oppression.
That's right.
So you got to do your job as a counselor. All right. And if you don't, then you're asking the black child and the black family and the community to carry white people today, just as we were forced to before.
That's an interesting, you always have me look at things differently. I see somebody in the comments wants some clarification. They said, wait, they used to do what to scramble their brains? You want to talk about that a little bit, the breastfeeding of where black women were forced to breastfeed white children and not breastfeed their own?
Yes. See, they'll only tell you that black women decided, okay, because they couldn't do anything, that they would kill their own children rather than let them be in captivity. You think black women ain't trying to figure out how to take these white folks off the planet? Have you not heard about ground glass? Have you not heard about using hat pins like that? So basically, what the child's skull, is soft early on, and it will heal back up. So you won't see the evidence of it. We tried every method you could think of to take our captors off the planet. And if I got to be forced to take care of this child, it would be great if this child just died. Because I got to take care of this child and not take care of mine. Oh, no. See, it's important that we study our resistance and forms of resistance, all right? And if we look for it. Now, the other thing that's important to do when we do that is to let ourselves be aware of when we begin to have moral pain. When moral pains come up in us.
I see that so much today.
We killed white babies. They
killed us.
We killed, are you kidding me? Y'all, it was and still is war.
It's war, yeah.
Choose your battles.
Speaking of that,
choose your comrades. Okay?
Yeah.
Choose your weapons. But you can't choose the war because it's being heaped upon us every day.
Right. That's a good segue. Yeah, no, this is a good segue because I think that from my conversations, I feel some ambivalence on the part of our families and some of our people in our communities when it comes to, like you mentioned at the beginning, of trying to really organize our life to teach our own children. and to homeschool and do it in a way that young people are learning at a high level. The other thing is there's real barriers, because when you think about the essential workers, meaning working class or so-called low-wage workers, those are the transportation services providers. Those are the gig workers. That's mostly us and brown folks and other people of color, and poor white folks too. And then you also have the folks who are keeping our grocery stores open. We forget about that. We forget about the people who are keeping our restaurants open. None of the economy is closed. And I'm going to tell you, I'm done with the school reopening versus not reopening conversation. Where I'm at, and this is there's a bill also in Georgia, because this is why I want to talk to you about this now. There's a bill that's in New Hampshire that actually gives the most flexibility to parents and families. It will provide an education stipend up to about $5,000 a year directly to families to say this is an education stipend, can be used on anything educational, and is open to homeschoolers. However, the bill in Georgia is much more restrictive. And that bill says it can only be used for private schools. My problem with that is there's not enough private schools in Georgia to take on the mass of people who would be leaving the public school. And so what do you think about in terms of an advocacy perspective for Black families? This is going to be interest convergence. I'm going to ask you about this because you already know the introducers of these bills don't look like us, and they're also Republicans. So that's going to be a problem for Black people, right?
Sure.
The person who introduced the bill in New Hampshire is a white Republican. That's and right. I'm not sure who introduced the bill in Georgia, but I'm going to assume that Democrats did not introduce a bill like that because of their relationship with teachers unions.
Well,
now,
okay,
let me hear your reflections in terms of how should Black people, if we should have some interest convergence with these people who are trying to get their tax dollars to educate their children.
Okay, it's an old question because it's not new. And they're both pros and cons to it. The pros are that we do need to, at this point, and have forever, needed to be able to use our tax dollars to educate our own. Okay, this was when charter schools came on the scene. You had the same kind of thing when choice schools, whatever. Right now, the downside of both charter and choice is that white people were able to use charter schools, getting government money as semi-private schools, so they'd be able to cut back on the dollars. But because they could supplement, and that literally supplement what the school had and did, then they still would pay, but they pay much less. Now, how does that translate to homeschool? Well, there's something that you said that is the organization, in order to provide consistent instruction over a period of time, it's weak in our community. And in any community, you need an infrastructure to support, when you talk about supporting the whole population.
Exactly.
And so what's missing out of, we're going to let these folks take their tax dollars and take their $5,000 and be able to send it here and send it there, is you don't have any commitment to support institutions that would be developing by Black people that don't teach the whatever white people's agenda is. Okay, so in a long-term way, it can be a problem, but it's just a problem of racism. You know what I'm saying? That is one of the things that has been reduced. When Black people took over in the 70s, Black people took over public schools. All right, we literally took over them, made many of them African-centered schools, and said, we're going to control this. All right, it's going to be important that while we homeschool and private school our children, and we do need to do that, that we also take charge of institutions and governmental money, all right, that would really support the development of an infrastructure for that, okay? Or else we're looking, it's not complete, all right? And I've been working and supporting homeschools, we've been for years, and I advocate. I took my children out of schools because they were trying to teach my daughter that she wasn't good in math.
I know.
I mean, literally, subtly. Now, y'all, one of the things that we really have to do, and I won't go on a tangent on this, I'll get back to these bills. But we have to graduate from the measure of racism being mostly or solely based on inclusion or exclusion. About to kill me. Okay, we're included. All right. So whether that's Kamala Harris, we're included. Whether it's whatever, we're included. So if we're included, then everything is all right. No. Or if we're excluded, everything is terrible. Y'all, we got to go past inclusion and exclusion as the measure, because integration and desegregation was also invasion. All right.
That's right.
Clarence Thomas was included. Have that benefited us? Okay.
No.
We have to go past the measure of inclusion and exclusion as the measure for yes, we will, no, we won't, etc. Okay. We have to really take a look at what is it that we want and what will we have to sustain, all right, in our community. Now, like it or lump, all right, so let me go back to these. If I had to choose between those two bills, I certainly would choose the New Hampshire bill. Okay.
I would too. We on the same page.
They're absolutely about that. What we need to do though is look at, for example, if we're going to support and say we're going to have Black education and we want to support Black teachers, then what is necessary in order to support? You have these parents who are saying, okay, I got $5,000, but then most of that money will still go to white private schools, for example. All right. All right. If you use the Georgia example, then it'll go to white private schools. Or guess what? Thomas Jesse Jones is coming back. In order for your Black school to be accredited, then guess what you have to do? All right. You have to then create a school that they will agree to or that they will accredit. I'll give you an example. Our Education Institute, 83.3% of our graduates get full 4-year scholarships. We do not require teachers with certificates, because the people who are certifying them don't know how to certify somebody in terms of whether they're qualified to teach Black children.
That's right.
You know what I'm saying? The standard is, I'm sorry, you got to know the subject. You have to love the subject. You have to love Black people and the children. You ain't getting nowhere close to our children unless you show me that you love the subject, because you transfer enthusiasm. It is not just that you know it, or you can be one chapter ahead. The way you get a child excited about writing is that you are excited about writing. You want to be excited. Imagine going to, in every class you go to in middle school, in high school, the teacher loves what they're teaching and they actually use it in life. An artist who draws, who does not just one chapter ahead, a person who does math and who just loves it, a person who writes it, they love it and they use it. Imagine your children going to that, and the response when you go to every class and the teacher loves the subject, is knowledgeable about it, uses it, loves them, and also advocates for the Black community. If any of those are missing, I'm sorry. Okay. Now, and those are not examples on the teacher certification exam, right? Or do you know how to get a Black child to learn more than you? How to get a Black child to succeed in an oppressive environment that you're going to be sending them to at the next level? Do you know how to do that while you're teaching math, science, social studies, language arts, etc.? If you don't know how to do that, then you're not qualified to teach. Now, what we need is, the problem with when we just deal with the isolated legislation is we'll get so into to advocating for one piece of legislation as if it's the savior, okay? As opposed to, this is a peg, okay? Here's how we can use this peg advantageously. Here are the cautions and the problems with this, okay, as well. How do we account for the problems for it and counter it? What do we build? You see, white folks, Republicans or Democrats, will not be saviors of Black people.
Well, no, this bill is not. This is New Hampshire, clearly. This bill ain't thinking about Black folks. These are white people who have bought $1 million houses because of the school system and the property taxes that they go into. I live in a county like that, in Montgomery County, Maryland.
That's right.
And that's why you see the reopening debate is mostly surrounded by white upper middle class people, because they're like, this is not what I signed up for. I got this damn mortgage for 30 years and it's $1 million house and I bought it in the school district. My child is in kindergarten. I need my return on investment. What I'm saying is that for Black people, there may be some interest convergence that I'm in terms of, oh, y'all giving the $5,000 education fund? Oh, I'm gonna need mine too then, because I would love to build an infrastructure for homeschooling collaboratives and micropods as well for
Absolutely.
Black children run by Black people.
I think it's fantastic that we do that. Okay, I think it's critical that we do that. And it's also important that we begin to have a process of retraining Black teachers and bringing them home. Okay, and we have sent them out, and they've worked behind enemy lines, many of them. Okay, to do the best they can for our students in a racist system. What they haven't done and what we haven't supported them do or requiring is them dismantling that system. All right. So because it often turns down to a Black teacher debate versus children, and these parents are going to take this money and they're not going to use it well, and all of that stuff like that, right?
Yeah, we're going to face that. Yeah.
And so it's really important that we know there is not. That's why I said it's not a one-shot fix all kind of solution.
We need
to, so in terms of advocacy for that, yes. We also need resources, and this is where for folks who are running around dealing with NGOs and nonprofits and whatever, we need to be telling them what we want, not we then letting them and their budget decides what they want. Okay, so if we said, you know what, the more we got to take our children out of these schools, we got this puny $5,000. Okay, and so we want to use it in this way, because you see, $5,000 only works when you already have an infrastructure. Okay.
I was just going to ask you, do we need to build a green book as a resource book as we push simultaneously for these kind of bills to pop up in places where Black people are? And I'm thinking about the South. Just rock with me for a minute. And I'm thinking about, because, you know, I know that I'm not a Republican or a Democrat. I'm thinking about Black interests. Right. The South is controlled by Republicans, right? They're all about freedom and all of this other kind of stuff. When it comes to education, right, some people on the left, and especially teachers union, is going to call this privatization of education. Let me move that down so we can see each other. They're going to call this so-called privatization of education. And I'm done with that kind of conversation. I'm done with the intellectual masturbation about privatized education, when we just seen a video last week again of a big brawly white man, police officer, bounce the head of a Black baby up off some concrete. Do you understand what I'm saying? So it's time for Black people to do this thing for ourselves. This is the perfect time, because you're either going to put your children back into an environment where the policing is going to even be more pronounced because of the public health issue. You're going to have teachers calling police on children who take off their masks. You're going to have any kind of disruption. You're going to have law enforcement on top of these babies. So what I'm saying is that when I mean interest convergence, is that we do live in a country that have these representatives and all of these different things, and we vote in the highest numbers, especially in the South, now in Georgia specifically. Y'all been all over the news and everything for doing a good job and getting Democrats elected, and y'all did a real good job.
Make your point.
Anyway, if you have Republican legislatures down there who would be more inclined to do something like what's happening in New Hampshire versus a Democratic legislature, should Black people be making phone calls to them and saying, we want this same kind of legislation here, but we want to be able to use the dollars for homeschooling and what we see it for, and at the same time be building the list of resources that Black folks can use?
No, we shouldn't be calling them. What we should be doing is writing our own legislation that includes the parts that we want to have in it. Okay, that is one of the things is you can put the difference between white Republicans and Black, between Republicans and Democrats, and put in a teaspoon. Okay, you literally can. So I don't really deal with, they're Republicans or whatever. The fact of the matter is, if we hear or see somebody doing something that we think is advantageous and that we want to get behind, then let's rewrite the damn thing, okay, and get Black legislators to begin to do it. Now, I would like to then have it be as a part of a bigger package, okay, and it can have pieces and different pieces. We $5,000 as you said, there is not the infrastructure, right? a $5,000 works, or can work in the system because they can say this is per child because you have so many other supports. The school building's already built. The number of the pieces are in place. So would it be great? Because where I am, we're private, school and homeschool support, etc., and have been for years. So do I think it's good if Black parents could say, we want to send our children to our education institute and we're using our tax dollars? Sure. And we also need to we got to work probably on about 3 or 4 different fronts, and that ain't nothing new. Okay. So the problem is often trying to get behind something and we start selling it as the answer, as opposed to this is one answer within this piece right here that is important. Here are the problems with it. Here are the advantages. We're going to use advantages. We'll either counter the disadvantages or we'll deal with them later on because the current situation is emerging. All right? Therefore, we use what we call a both and approach. Here is what's good about it. Here's what's problematic about it in a racist environment. Okay, I mentioned Thomas Jesse Jones coming out of
Tell
captivity.
the audience who that is for people who might not know.
All right, so we're coming out of captivity. Black people created schools. All right, now I know they'll tell you white folks came down and they created. Black people created schools, took over schools, and produced people like Ida B. Wells, produced people like Marcus Garvey. Black people were producing folks who were kicking natural butt. All right, who would start Tulsa, Greenwood, Archer, and Pine, and who would buy the property and say this is for Black people only, and create a boarding home so that people could come live in that boarding house while they build their homes. Right? That was what our education was producing. And white folks were like, excuse me. And their strategy to interrupt that was to educate Black children or to direct the education of Black people away from that. And again, this is most of the schools are Black controlled schools. All right. Now, but the education they were receiving had them have an independent mindset and a sense of identity as Black people. And that needed to be interrupted. So the Phelps Stokes Fund hired Thomas Jesse Jones, a white boy, who would go around and determine whether or not this particular school needed to be accredited or closed because they weren't accredited. Okay. And so and what would have a Black school get Thomas Jesse Jones's stamp of approval? They were kowtowing to white people. So the schools that were producing the Ida B. Wells Barnetts, okay, the Marcus Garveys and the others, were summarily closed. What do we do? How does that relate to now? So let's say, if we only just talk about this legislation and if it goes through in the $5,000 and then people take $5,000, send it to our education institute, whatever, then folks will just deal with if you don't deal with the other political part, the other advocacy part, the other challenging part, then it's a fantasy because the overall agenda to control Black education and make sure Black people get an education that is disempowering is still in place. All right. And you begin to have people having more legislation around who should be accredited, what homeschools should be allowed to send their children on to college. Are they doing more damage to the children? All right. So you'll have these social workers and all that stuff begin to be looked at. Oh, well, I'm sorry. You can't homeschool your child. You're doing them all kind of damage. Never mind the kind of damage they were being had when they were being slammed up in a school system with police and whatever. So I'm saying that, sure, I'm of the 2 pieces of legislation, I'm for people being able to take money who don't want to send their children or who the situation is better for them to take the money and direct it to homeschool cooperatives and whatever, and begin to do that collectively. I'm all for it. It doesn't fit in many situations, okay, as the parents may not be confident about it. So therefore, this system that we begin to create, those who can take the $5,000 or whatever and begin to supplement it and create some. Now somebody 2 years from now might say, you know what, that school is strong enough. I feel more comfortable taking my child here. So we don't need a one-size-fit-all kind of piece in a racist environment. Plus, regardless of which way we go, we have to still advocate for Black control of our education. All right. And I don't just, even all up to the point of what's the evaluation for college when somebody is ready for college? What do we say? All right, because often all we're doing is whatever they need to know in order for them to get in college. You're like, excuse me. So for them to get in college, how do you measure that? All right. And for example, there are many courses that AYA doesn't teach, and there are many that we do teach. Okay. When the question becomes not what the content is, but you're talking about development of their minds, development of their analysis, development of their articulation, development of whatever. I'll give you an example. Instead of life science, we teach engolomelanin. Well, life science is junior high school or middle school introduction to math and to chemistry and biology. Well, we do the same thing, except we're introducing them to chemistry and biology by the chemistry and biology of their bodies first, and particularly the chemical melanin and its connections to immunization, et cetera, et cetera. Now, to understand it, they literally have to go deeper in middle school than they would ever in a typical life science class. But you see, then folks say, oh well, but that's not good enough because that's not following the regular standard textbook and whatever. So it's important that we be ready for that. Okay, that there is not nothing is going to take the place of us deciding at every level and every way we can to take charge of education of our children. And whether that we're going to take over a school, like you could just say, fine, we're going to take over the darn school board. All right, take it over.
Well, we've done that. We tried that before. You probably remember 1968 Oceanville, Brownsville in Puerto Rico. I'm sorry, in New York City, Oceanville, Brownsville, it was Black and Puerto Rican parents. My apologies.
Right.
But we know that there was a vicious assault, particularly led by Al Shanker of the AFT, the American Federation of Teachers, which is one of the largest teachers unions in the country. And at that time, it was the largest teacher strike because the parents successfully did actually take over the school board and took over as community control. I'm actually calling for that again, not necessarily. I'm calling for a little bit more independence, and I wanted to be clear. I wanted to be clear really quickly. The New Hampshire bill doesn't say anything about accreditation. It literally says you have to use this money for anything education related.
I hear that. To me, part of what's important is for anybody, if to the extent that the New Hampshire bill makes sense, then talk to Black legislators about rewriting the bill and rewrite the part, keep the parts that make some sense and write it and look at how you get it through. But also have as a part of that movement that you account for the downsides and you have as advocacy. So you end up making allies as opposed to enemies, because you're not just saying, oh, they're doing it there and we need some of that. Like, yes, we do. And here's some of the problems with it. So guess what? Our approach is a three-pronged approach. We want that because immediately Black people don't want to send their children back into these cubicles and need some of their tax dollars and resources to help do that. Boom. And number two, here's a danger for that. And we want to counter that this way. And here is what we ultimately got to do where we're looking at having to take charge of it. See, what you just said about Oceanville, Brownsville is what I was saying about we don't need to pretend. Even if we take the $5,000 and we then create, and we ought to, all right, and support independent African education, which I believe in, it will also be attacked unless we're on the offensive. And it'll be attacked anyway. It's just that we need to be on the offensive with it. We don't need, that's what I mean by, we don't need to pretend that one strategy is a panacea, okay? And somehow it's going to take over the racism, okay? We know the different ways folks come. And part of what's important.
My whole goal is to get the working class parents some help. Let's be honest, man. Like middle class Black folks, white folks, and everybody doing what they got to do for their kids. I was talking to Hashem, my husband and I, and we calculated how much we've spent so far on the education related expenses for my daughter. It's about $6,000 just in the last year. COVID been here and school has been out in Maryland since March of 2020. That's $6,000 that we had to move around in our budget. My point is there are people who don't have that in their budget and they deserve that money to educate their children.
I'm with you. And they also, one of the things that also happens is working class Black folks also have been most convinced that they cannot provide it.
That's it.
You understand? So
I had to overcome that.
Of course, almost all of us do, because it's built into our educational system that we're not enough.
That we're not good enough.
I got people got PhDs and they don't think they're good enough. Okay, and so all the more so in those situations, all the more so when they don't have flexibility. Okay, when transportation is a problem. This is why it's important that you have a multi-pronged approach. If you're going to have this $5,000 and advocate for this to be whatever, then you need to advocate for some support in other ways. Now, you may only get the $5,000, but you're clearly advocating and saying you recognize and we recognize the complexity of it. All right, and what would need to be supportive so that working class Black people could best take advantage of it. Okay.
Yes.
Otherwise, we actually are coming from a middle class perspective, saying that this is for them, but not accounting for the differences that are built in because of the differences of income and mobility, transportation, and confidence. Okay, then it ought to be a part of this bill. And listen, I've been doing this a long time. I worked in Alabama. I worked
That's
in
what
Alabama.
I'm asking you.
I'm talking about before Higher Education Institute. Okay, I worked in Alabama. All right, for the Federation of Community Controlled Child Care Centers of Alabama. This is an operation that came into being during the early civil rights movement, and when folks started pushing in Title 20 for daycare, all right, and saying that if you didn't go to a certified daycare, then you couldn't get Title $20. Title $20 was coming to pay for daycare centers, whatever. Well, this organization rose up. The director for years was Sophia Bracey Harris, a great friend of mine, and I worked there for 10 years. So what they did is began to say, we will provide education that is certified. We will certify these daycare centers and their teachers so that Black children can stay into Black centers, okay? And these centers in Black communities. And you had churches and other folks pool their money together to create, you're talking about selling, to create daycare buildings so that our children could stay being educated by Black mamas, okay, and daddies, right, and whatever, all right? So it's important that if we're going to, that we say, this is why I said we got to look at what is it that our children need and our people need, not start from what they're offering. Now, if what they're offering can be used as a part of our overall agenda, great, okay? But also one thing is important. Advocacy is overrated. I don't mean that to be done. I'm gonna use this is Black History Month. Carter G. Woodson said, the Black community don't need no more leaders, they need workers.
Come on.
Okay? That is, very often you'll have advocates who end up, we're the leaders, here's the policy, we need it. Who's building anything? Who's working to make it happen? Because part of what happens when you do start to work to make it happen, you're producing. You also become wise, okay? Because you're not just seeing it from the perspective of advocacy. Is advocacy important? Sure it is. Is theory important? Sure. Anyone says, great theory is critical. You got to have a plan. You also have to have people on the ground doing the work. Or no, guess what? How about you, me, all of us do the work? Which is why for Aya, what do I say? Our community is long on ought to and short on how to. Okay. We're so long, and we'll get this is what we ought to do, and we may be right, but we ought to, but like, come on, how do we do it? Because if we balance our ought to with how to, we become models. Also, when we're advocating ought to, it is seasoned with with how to do it. All right, and people will affirm it. Too many times you get people who only talk about what we ought to do based on this policy, and that policy, and they haven't built anything that they're talking about having it. It's not informed. Their advocacy is not informed by their work. All right, and the work is what then gives them a sense of wisdom and allows them to gain ground with people, because people can hear when your advocacy is comprehensive, when your advocacy is informed by your wisdom. We don't need a whole bunch of just advocates. I swear we don't. We need more workers than we do. Because let's get real. Laws are important, but the real deal is who gets to enforce them, y'all? Okay?
Right.
Who gets to enforce? What power is the ability to make things happen? All right. And we need to accept where we are. We need to accept that we need to heal our community. But I'm talking about heal our community so that our community will be better warriors and healers and builders. We don't need to just heal our community so we don't feel bad no more. We need to heal our community so we're more likely to build for Black people. Because we're wounded, especially when it comes to that. You can tell me about self-care, all right, all day long, which is really fine. It's wonderful, but self-care that ain't connected to Black people's care is trash. Okay?
Wow.
It's
Woo!
just trash.
I heard
All right?
that.
I mean, a part of my self-care is lifting my community.
Yeah.
Otherwise, what happens is you slip ever
Community
so
care.
slightly, you slip ever so subtly into white individualism. That's not the intent. Many people who say we need self-care are folks who recognize that Black people need to care for ourselves. Black people, whatever. But you see, if a part of our care is not connected to community care, sure, there needs to be balance. But not balance as in you leave it out. Not balance just because you feel bad, then you're going to focus on yourself. When you haven't been hurt or working for and with Black people to overturn this oppressive. Many people who are hollering about self-care, they ain't involved every day. Their wounds haven't come because they've been challenging oppression. Their wounds have come because they've been running from it. Okay? Because they've been following white people's models of what is good. Okay? Mark asks, are teachers unions working in the best interest of the law? You know the answer to that question. No. Okay. What unions have worked in the interest of Black children? I'm talking about Black children particularly. Okay. It's important, y'all, that we take it like in small groups, gather where you are. Okay. Gather if you're a community of educators or parents, and just start to say, all right, where is it? Are we for real? And what is it we need to do? And what do we need to fight? When I say fight, what people, policies, and practices do we need to fight that will provide temporary relief? Because the ultimate relief is when we're no longer under the domination of other people who mean us no good. In the meantime, there are people, policies, and practices that we need to challenge and or champion. That's what we're talking about.
That's what we're talking about. That's right.
But now don't make it everything, because we also need to heal. We need to heal from the wounds of oppression that tell me, where I tell myself I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, that my gap is ugly, my lips too big, my butt's too big, and I'm too dark or too light, whichever way you want to go with the wound of oppression. Okay?
Colorism, yeah.
That is, I gotta heal from that, because any of those wounds that I have are implants.
That is so true.
I want you to understand, the wounds that I have are implants, and our enemies know where they are because they put them there, and they will use those implants as portals.
Yes.
For entry. Okay.
Yes.
So healing ourselves of that is actually wonderful defense. It also then provides us ability for us to come together and do the next thing, and that is to build with and for our people, and make no shame about it. All right. And I'm gonna be honest with you. I'm about tired of people talking about they're unapologetically Black. Just be it, damn it. Okay? Don't announce it. Just be it. Because the people who say unapologetically, the reason they're saying they're unapologetically Black is that they're partly apologizing. Okay? It's like, just be it. I'll be honest with you. I'll give you another one, because you give me today. I love that Black youth and people are moving and have been moving. Absolutely 100%. The banner Black Lives Matter. It's okay, because every generation got to choose it. I will say honestly, it is weaker.
It is.
And here's why it's weaker. Because it's a request that other people affirm it. Which is why you got little white folks in their little neighborhoods put on Black Lives Matter. And that's fine, but it's weaker. Black power, yes, and I'm biased. I'm from that whole era.
Yes, you are, Bubba.
But even if you came up with another one, so I don't care about you don't have to go backwards. But a statement of Black power is not a request that other people affirm it. It is your self-affirmation. Okay. And to cross the water from Stokely and whatever to King, all right. Even King says, Black power, we must reach down in our own self and sign with the pen and ink of our own self-assertion, our own emancipation proclamation, so that we are proclaiming Black power as a way to organize us. Now,
we don't hear that, King.
When we were saying, no, we don't hear that. Right, but if we deal with our affirming to us of our power, then as I come to heal from the wounds of believing that I'm powerless, then I operate as if I'm powerful. All right? Not pseudo power. I don't ask people to give me power. Douglas said, Frederick Douglass, power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did and never will. Okay? You want to know the limits of tyrants? The limits of tyrants are prescribed by what we're willing to tolerate.
Yes.
Okay? But you see, we think, and y'all listen, fine that people organized and delivered, however you could say delivered in a rigged system, okay, a presidency. Will we organize similarly for Black power? Black power that's
Can I
independent.
interrogate that idea a little bit about how we organize for a presidency? We actually did not do that.
Yes, I understand. I'm with you. But for any Black people who, and I got your point, and I love
You
you.
know what I mean by
I know
that.
exactly what you mean, and I'm for it. The point is this: to whatever extent that people participated, in this effort that would deliver the presidency. Okay.
White liberals played Black people to beg Black folks to vote. That's what happened.
I got it. Big, gave money, having people going house to house. I'm in Georgia, Lord knows. I had so many emails coming to my house, so many letters, people knocking on the doors. I understand. My point is this: whatever effort that we use, let's use that effort, similar or greater effort, to organize independent Black efforts.
Yes.
They may be political, they may be educational, they
Yes.
may be economic, but use that same kind of fervor. All right. And if we find that we can't muster that, then we need to examine the injected oppression that would have me muster that energy in service of an agenda set by others versus one that where they are not involved with it and they may even not like it. Okay. And what I'm saying here is we got to heal us. All right. We operate like we ain't been wounded by oppression, or that wounding happened, stop with Jim Crow, or stop doing it. Are you kidding me? We're more fearful now, Zakia, than we were when we were being lynched.
I know.
Okay.
I can
This is
see
when
it.
I said integration and desegregation was invasion. And guess we're the only one that's going to heal us. All right? And we confuse many times that announcing it is going to heal us. Once I know, and once we know that we're wounded, why do I need to keep telling you? Sister, you wounded. Sister, you wounded. Sister, you wounded. Don't you know you wounded? Well, I slip into shame game. As opposed to, if I know you are, then is there anything I can say or do to help provide some healing, or at least provide some seeds, plant some seeds that next another person 30 minutes or 20 years out down the road, then may foster something. Often we're not willing to accept how far down the hill we are.
Yeah.
If we're not willing to do that, then we can't, any plan to get us over the hill will be based on delusion and fantasy, as
Yeah.
opposed to, yeah, we are down the hill, but this ain't the first time, and we ain't far as we have been. So let's get busy. How do we inch on up this hill and crest this hill? All right, that's really what we need to do, and our education needs to be drenched in that. Okay, all right. That when we're teaching math and science and social studies and language arts, it needs to be drenched in that awareness, having our children know where we are, not fantasy, and at the same time to know what to do to have us progress from where we really are, not where we used to be, not where we want to pretend we are, but from right here, because that is where their power will come from. We also are setting a goal, and the real thing is we need to ask them to join us. This foolishness we got. Children are this, children, our youth are do this. What are we doing? We need
Yeah.
to ask them to join us in challenging people, policies, and practices. We need to ask them to join us in helping to heal ourselves and our community. We need to ask them to join us. Like, what is Susu's are we a part of? How are we putting our money together with Black people? All right. How are we building institutions with Black people that we ask our children to join? What are we modeling? And so what you're hearing from me is warrior, healer, builder. We have to do all three of those things. All right.
Simultaneously.
Simultaneously. We can't afford, oh, no, the brothers are the warriors and the sisters are the healers. No. I'm sorry. Okay. I'm sorry. Right?
And it's never been like that in
It ain't
history.
never
We've
been like
always
that.
done it
Yeah.
both
My
collectively.
mama would kick natural black. And she was also a powerful healer.
Right.
My dad would kick natural black. And together they built a business that would provide a platform for me that allowed me to go to college and be an independent in mind, because I already knew how to make money and I didn't go to college for them folks to figure out, give me a degree so I can know how to make money. So I started asking, looking at other things. All right.
Right.
And there's a real connection that people don't get. When you come to an institution with a foundation where you're not desperate for their affirmation, in that case, a degree in order to make money, then you do different things with your time. You see different things. When you're in the same class, but you'll see different things. You see, my father was self-employed, a junk man. Okay, he and my mother started him in that business, and they would build it together. Then they separated. She went to move to New York. But the point is, I was raised in that, and then started my own business at 15, photography. My dad was mad with me because I had to lose money to go to college.
Wow.
I had contracts with 3 different nightclubs. I'd hired photographers in them. Okay, so by the time I'm 17 years old, getting ready to go to college, then I had these contracts and these employees and whatever, and I had to let it go. And he was out of shape.
Wow.
But
Wow.
the foundation was I knew I could do that and I could do it again. So I'm not sitting here in this class talking about philosophy and just saying, okay, let me just hear what you say, regurgitate it back so I can get a grade. So once I get a grade and I get good scores, then I can go to this next level or I can make some money. And without y'all, I can't make no money. No, I already made money and I knew how to make money. You understand? So as I'm looking and listening, I'm listening to the philosophy and I'm listening for a different thing. Okay.
Right.
All right.
And
And
that's
so
what you're teaching your students at Aya. We,
absolutely.
we appreciate you so much, Baba Wakesa. We want to go ahead and wrap up our hour together, but I wanted before we adjourn this time together, because this has been amazing and very fruitful. The comments have been popping, and we've had a good, consistent viewership while you've been talking. Really quickly, we do have several people who are on from Georgia as well. If you could just rattle off from memory for parents who are looking for an alternative to the so-called virtual learning that's happening online, but in maybe some districts, but I know that some Georgia districts are already open for in-person learning. What are some alternatives for Black parents in Georgia, particularly for, I guess, the metro Atlanta area, and then nationally as well? How can people contact Aya if they want to sign up for Aya Educational Institute?
Okay, I put in the text chat there our website, ayaed.com. That's ayaed.com. And my email address and the email address of Afia, the co-director of Aya and the love of my life and wife for over 34 years. That's how you can get in touch with us. You can call us on the phone. We're reachable 404-798-6170. And we're blessed because there's been a movement and that we've been a part of in the Atlanta metro area of developing and supporting independent schools and us working together to support each other. There's Akabin, a Black independent school education initiative, Baba Barudi and Mama Ya. There's Imhotep that we mentioned before. There is Kilombo. There is Kipole Bole. There is Children of the Most High. I'm trying to think. I'm blocking on Sister Anda's school name, Mama Tamu's daughter. So there are a number of efforts, and if you call me, because one of the things is we serve middle school and high school students. So there are other students who are younger. All right. Sometimes people want part-time, full-time, and if we can help you, we certainly will direct you in that direction. What we really discourage is when people are starting these efforts that they try to be too much too fast. Some people try to serve a whole long swath of cradle to the grave, kindergarten to high school, and it's just too much often. And many times they end up failing, not because they're not intellectually capable, but there's a difference between doing that and actually doing that. There's when you go to our website, you also will. I want to mention Black Love Day. All right. And in this case, when we said we don't just talk about what we ought to do, we actually do things for you to be able to plug into and duplicate. And this
Yeah,
year,
all do. Yeah.
yeah, because if we're gonna say we ought to be together, then here's some, just check on that. You'll see, save the date. And I really want to say I appreciate, you and your advocacy, your education advocacy, your channel, and what you stand for. You know that I love you. And our people, we're gonna win, y'all. We need to take a good, long, greasy look at where we are. And it's not pretty, but also while we're taking a look at where we are, take a look at who we are, right? And whose we are. And that is pretty.
Thank you, Baba. Appreciate it. You always are so much fun to have, not just fun, but you give so many tools and strategies that people can immediately start using and give us a different way to think about things. So I appreciate you for everything that you all continue to do. And hopefully Aya will become a resource to more families in our community. Thank you
Thank you.
very much.
You're
And you all
welcome.
have a blessed day. We'll see you all next week. Take care, everybody.
Take care.